art is a universal language. You know, it offers a voice when words get lost or we can't understand. And when you think about it, since the beginning of man, we have been using art to record activities and history. We would not have the knowledge that we have today had it not been for art. Medically and psychologically, art is often used for self-expression. We tell a story, we're finding this inner release, and we're exploring the process, enjoying just the act of making art. So typically this isn't an interactive type of setting, but because we're on Zoom and there's so many of us on camera, it's kind of hard to navigate. But typically I would ask you to identify who these people are. So we have Edvard Munch on the top left, known as the Scream. We have our Van Gogh, our Jackson Pollock, Frida Kahlo, and de Kooning, William de Kooning. And I typically ask, you know, what did they have in common? What happens with each person? We had, you know, psychosis and hallucinations, paranoia. We had schizophrenia. We had Alzheimer's disease. We had chronic pain and depression and alcoholism. All of these were different artists that had their own stories and their own mental and physical elements that they still used art as a way to kind of get out how they were feeling. And a lot of people aren't aware that William de Kooning actually later in life developed Alzheimer's disease. And some argue that some of his best artwork was when he was in the throes of dementia. I want to show this.
Could I ask a question?
Can we hold our questions till the end? Is that okay?
I'm sorry, those who joined,
thank you.
We're going to hold questions until the end. So Angel will
Okay, thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. So I want to show this because I think it's important how it illustrates the importance of art. So when I was the programs director and supervisor for the Alzheimer's Association of Northern California, Northern Nevada chapter, every year for national, we would have to do a facilitator survey to see how our support group facilitators, how are they doing? And so we pass out surveys, and I received this survey back, and it says, first time, no opinion yet. So they weren't able to say how they're doing. So I took the bottom, entered in the data, and then I flipped it over on the back, and then I saw this, me. And from an art therapy perspective, there's so much going on here. You have a face with no eyes, no ears, no mouth. I'm not being seen. I'm not being heard. I can't hear and I can't see. You have a whole body that's fragmented. The neck and the hips aren't even in alignment with each other. The arms and the legs, there's no arms, there's no legs, yet it's reaching out, almost as if I'm ready to be embraced and I need to be embraced. This probably told me more about how this person was doing than just bubbling in some answers. So just by seeing this drawing, I was able to get in touch with the facilitator and identify who this person was and get them the support they needed. I would not be able to do this had it been for this art. So we're going to be talking about what is the meaning of creativity? What is mindfulness? Why are we practicing mindfulness? How does it play into art? What is the psychology behind creativity? And why is it important? As we're aging, why do we need to be creative? And then I'll show some examples of art through people that are aging normally versus those who have some cognitive and memory deficits. And the research validating the importance of art on the brain, what's happening in our museum and art tours, and then I'll take some questions. Typically we would have an experiential, but we're gonna do an art directive at the very end, and I'll show you what that is so you can practice it or play with it on your own after the program. So when we look at this, this is typically what we see. We think of ourselves as, people will ask, oh, are you left or right brained? Oh, you're an artist, you must be right brained. Oh, you're a scientist, you must be left brained. This is actually a myth. When you're creating, you're using your entire brain. You're not just using your right side. There's an overlay where you're using all of your brain. So it's, you know, we're nurturing the entire component of it. And there's been some really fascinating studies that I'll get into later that verify this. So mindfulness is starting to become very hand in hand with just art and creativity. And why is that? Because it's very present centered. So mindfulness is basically derived from John Zabak Zen. It took on a Buddhist form, but it's, you know, and we turn to look at it in art therapy, we don't look at it in any spiritual or religious context. We're just looking at it for what it is. And that means I'm going to be present. I'm not going to sit and project about what my future is going to be and think of the what ifs. And I don't want to ruminate and keep thinking about the past, but I'm living in the present. I'm going to take in my emotions, take in how I'm feeling, and I'm going to be mindful of that. How am I feeling? What is my perspective? And if I'm feeling crummy in this moment, what can I do to make it a little bit better? So when you're engaging in creativity, you're actually practicing this type of mindfulness. And what we're finding in research, by having this mindfulness and creativity, studies have shown that there's been better we're controlling our blood pressure better. We're offering a distraction from chronic pain. And I work a lot with chronic pain seniors. And it's amazing how art seems to be the one thing that really helps distract from the pain, because unfortunately, as we age, chronic pain and depression go hand in hand, and those are at a very high suicide risk. There's also anxiety. So it's important to monitor this. It's known to improve our mental health. We're increasing tolerance in life. There's been a decrease of psychotropic drugs, like psychotic drugs, using Haldol, Seroquel to control behaviors. There's a less reliance on them. And overall, we're just providing a whole spiritual and physical sense of calm. So you may be familiar with this. This came out in the past few years, and they called it the adult coloring books. And it threw the art therapy world in a tizzy. Everybody hated it. They kept saying, this isn't art therapy, because they were saying, this is art therapy. No, it's not. It's a profession. Yes, art therapy is absolutely a profession by a clinical psychologist, a mental health therapist in the field. But what this is perceived to be as art as therapy. This is not art therapy in the professional sense, but art as therapy in the sense of kind of self-medicating. They've been shown to help reduce anxiety, reduce some of those nervous feelings, and help to focus and help with distraction purposes. This was a famous study done looking at like a PET scan almost of a monk in a mindfulness state of mind. And it's highlighting areas in his brain that are activated. They're also finding that some of the way when we're engaged in creativity, we're having the same experiences as this person is in that mindfulness moment. So here's a baseline. And as you can see, there's some red areas in your parietal lobe. That is known for your visual attention, your perception of pain and touch. But when you're in that meditative state, you're in that calming presence, whether it's just sitting in that meditation state, being mindful, or being creative in the active process of art making, this is what they're finding. They're finding that release. So you're actually able to see it in the scans. So psychology and creativity, how do they go hand in hand? There was a study looking at participants 60 to 93 in the Journal of Aging Studies, and they identified 6 features that were crucial for aging. And the first thing is having a sense of purpose, and that doesn't go away as we age. We need to always have meaning in life. What is our meaning? You know, even if we're in retirement age or we're not having, you know, working in the traditional sense, what gives us a sense of purpose in life? What is it that we enjoy doing? What is our passion? You know, we're having positive interactions with others, not sitting around commiserating in negativity, but having positivity. We're engaging in personal growth. We're self-accepting of ourselves. We're finding our own self-empowerment and our own self-value of who we are as individuals, despite ageism. We're having autonomy. We're taking responsibility for ourselves. We're seen as a unique individual in the world, and we're recognizing each other's personal autonomy, as well as the need for good health. So a sense of purpose, all of this makes sense. It's as we age, you know, it's our passions, our interests, it's keeping up with the things that we love in life. Because when we don't, those thoughts and feelings can have a disastrous effect on our health and our well-being. So instead of referring it to as an ageism or an aging problem, we need to start looking at older adults as, you know, we're positive throughout the lifespan. These are just some examples of people who flourished later in life. You know, we tend to take on this philosophy of aging as bad or ugly, and we serve no purpose. I was sitting back when I was traveling quite a bit. I was sitting next to a woman who pulls out a magazine, and the whole thing was about, the whole cover said anti-aging. And it was all about products that you can buy to help with, you know, sucking it in, to help hide the wrinkles, and everything was anti-aging. And I looked over and I teased her and I said, did that magazine come with a bottle of cyanide? Because we're not going to stop getting older, and it's time to embrace that fact. It's kind of a double-edged sword. So it's, be careful when you're watching the media, because you have a lot of media that focuses on youth and beauty, or you'll see magazines where all the gray is slick or hair is dyed and we have Spanx to suck it in. So it's just really looking at embracing ourselves and being mindful of the messages that we're getting, because those messages play effect on our subconscious. But you can see Miller Kaufman wrote his first novel at 90. Grandma Moses picked up painting at 70. Marc Chagall became the first living artist to be exhibited at the Louvre at 90. Frank Lloyd Wright completed his first design of the Guggenheim at 92. Verdi wrote Falstaff, that's one of his most acclaimed operas, at 85. These are just examples of the power of creative thinking and why it doesn't go away as we age. In fact, it makes you sharper. So we mature at different rates. Some of us are called late bloomers, and they're everywhere. There was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal by Richard Colgard on late bloomers in life and the importance of that creativity. So looking at some case studies. These are the typical type of art supplies I find. I do a lot with assisted living and dementia care, as well as independent senior living. And I will go into art studios and in these different types of assisted living complexes. And these are the types of art supplies that I find. And what is the message that we are giving? I see you as a child, I'm going to treat you as a child. Even for those with dementia, like Alzheimer's disease, these are the typical types of art supplies that you see. And I'll often be told, well, we don't have a budget. We're very limited on a budget. You can still buy a whole lot and not break the bank by using dignified quality materials, because sometimes when you're doing an art group in a senior center, or especially in a dementia facility, your art supplies can make it or break it. And they have this inner sense, and they know. I've had people come down and they'll tell me, this is babyish, I don't want to do this, I'm not a child. And then they'll sit down at the table and they'll feel the paper, that's watercolor paper, and they'll say, wow, this is really good paper. Well, these are good paints. Wow, this is good brushes. I've had people actually acknowledge the supplies that were in the middle, moderate stages of dementia. So they do go a long way. I'll often do mandalas. A mandala in Sanskrit means sacred circle. And I often ask them to create a mandala. And what supports you? Because loneliness and depression, especially in our elders, is very high and very common. And especially here we are in this pandemic where even more people are isolated, and it's targeting our elders. It's this virus. So it's important that we're also acknowledging one another and doing what we can to support one another, and not losing that sense that you do have support. So creating, here's a mandala. What supports you? We have Lake Tahoe on the bottom right. The bottom left are all parts of what supports them. It's places, it's pets, it's people. But getting to the person to recognize, I do have support systems in life. And there is meaning. This is someone in late stage Alzheimer's disease, in the very late stages, that just did this. And if we were just to assume, if we're just looking at this, we're just going to see a purple and pinkish blob. We don't know what this means. It's just like, okay. So as an art therapist, one of the processes is processing. So I will sit and talk with the person, and I will try to document everything that they say, and then I'll share it. Well, this is what this person had to say. She said, well, this has my name in it, and it says Maplewood, New Jersey. That's where I'm from. And I see my son in here, he visits me. And I wanted to use purple because purple is a happy color and I want to be happy. I was able to get this piece of information from somebody in the later stages of Alzheimer's disease just by doing this. And I took it back to the activity director, gave it to her, and when I left, I saw it in the trash can. So I pulled it out of the trash, went to her office and said, did you not read the back of this? And she read the back of it and was mortified. She's like, I get so many paintings, I can't keep them all. I can't believe I missed this. Her son was actually contemplating not coming back because he didn't think that she knew he came. So this really bridges those relationships, even in late stage Alzheimer's disease. Same with here on the right. We just see this and we think, okay, there's some peak in blue. What does that mean? Well, it means I see my house on the left, the blue, and this is the park where I like to sit and watch the kids play. Kids are fun. I don't know why we lose that kind of fun when we grow up, but it seems like most people do. You can still have these deep, meaningful conversations. You know, they might be able to balance their checkbook or write a bill or cook a meal, but they can still sit and have a philosophical discussion of life. And it's giving them the opportunity. This is when I worked in the Bay Area at one of the psychiatric adult hospitals, and this person came in and he was labeled as psychotic and OS, not otherwise specified. And he was heavily medicated on Haldol, an antipsychotic drug that was making him worse. And he couldn't talk and he was having a hard time. So he came in and he started doing this process, and this was very heavy. He was layering sand upon sand and the glue and layering it. And I just sat there watching his process. And I said, tell me what this is. And he said, this is what my brain feels like. It's a mess. It's heavy. Something's wrong. So I was able to take this back to our head psychiatrist on the unit. And I said, we might want to, this is hypothetical. I don't know. It's not future telling, but I think that there might be something going on chemically. We may want to do a brain scan because he'd never had a psychotic break in his entire life. And this is an elderly man who they did a brain scan. Turned out he had multiple TIAs, multiple strokes, and he had some other brain types of brain injury. So they were able to get him on the right path. So this is also an example of showing how the arts and sciences and medicine need each other. We wouldn't have known this. And this is looking at stroke victims. This was fascinating to me because I've worked a lot with stroke, and there's been studies showing that individuals who've had stroke, when they participate actively, like in art therapy or music therapy and speech therapy, they tend to improve faster than those that don't engage in any types of those types of therapies. I was giving a lecture at UC Berkeley, and unbeknownst to me, there was a neurologist in the audience who was going to be talking about delirium and dementia. And she was fascinated by this because she said, you see it on scans, but I've never seen it artistically done. So this was a woman that had a lot of different types of TIAs, a lot of stroke. And I helped her a lot with this particular one. This was one of the first ones she did. And depending on a stroke, you don't know, sometimes they only focus on the left side of the page, or they'll only focus on the right side of the page, depending on where the stroke was, because they don't know there's another part of the paper. And it's very fragmented. It's hard to close circles. It's hard to draw lines. It's very fragmented. So I helped her a lot with this because she was very frustrated. She started on the left and she wanted to do a flower. So I was able to help her on the right. About 6 months, she started doing this on her own. There were more complete round, more use of the space. She wasn't focused on the left side of the page. She was able to use the entire space. And this was after a year. So the neurologist from Stanford was just, when I was at UC Berkeley, was just fascinated by this. She said, how long did this take? And I said, about a year. And she said, that's interesting because typically with stroke, it can take about a year for cells to mend. This was working with transitions because as we age, things start shutting down, things start to weaken. Our central nervous system, the elasticity, our vision, our hearing, things start to kind of falter as we get older. And there's constant losses. And this was one of them. This was a piece of tissue paper that she wanted to watercolor on, and she called it Transitions. She had just lost her husband. She was contemplating whether or not she could remain in her home after 50 years and if she needed to go into senior living. And it was a way for us to begin the conversation of talking about transitions and what is life going to look like outside of the home, outside of not having her husband. And what does that look like? And this was somebody that was very depressed, very suicidal, and feeling a burden. She was feeling like she was a burden to her children. So we were able to have a nice therapeutic session starting with this particular painting. This was the same thing here. There was a gentleman that cared for his wife over 50 years, and she had dementia. He did not, but he cared for her, and he refused to put her in a home. And he had an apartment in this facility in Maplewood, New Jersey, and he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to acknowledge it, and the whole staff and residents were very worried about him. And I came in and he sat down. He was a veterinarian, and he titled it, he said to me, "My wife died 2 months ago, and this is the house and the front door is open leading to nowhere. What's next for her? What's next for me?" He put on the back of the paper, this is what he wrote, "What's next?" This was the first thing that he was actually able to, after 2 months, to be able to even acknowledge the ambiguous feelings that he was feeling. He was incredibly depressed and starting to doubt that there was a God, doubting spirituality. He was a very religious man, but it began a very deep conversation and being able to support him and his family and looking at what is next, especially for caregivers or spouses who've been caring for a loved one for so many years. And that becomes your identity as a caregiver. And then all of a sudden the person passes, and now what is my new purpose in life? What do I do with my life now? And that is finding new purpose and new meaning. Working with chronic pain, that's that mindfulness. This is looking at collage and helping to distract. Where is your favorite place in the world? What are the types of images that are soothing to you, and having something to look at? Sometimes we'll even create a mobile and hang it above the bed or the couch for the living room, just something to focus on in times of that pain. And you have to manipulate materials too. If I have somebody with severe arthritis in their hand, I'm going to really wrap up the paintbrush and wrap up, with painter's tape and try to modify it so that it's less painful. Deep thoughts are not easy for an 80-year-old. The only thing she had was her wedding ring, and her husband had passed too. And it was the same thing, trying to find new meaning, feeling like I'm a burden, feeling like I'm 80, I've had a good life, maybe it's time to rethink things. But after working with her and processing what are things going to be, what's this new life going to look like, this is what she did upon discharge. My happy hands in growth. Finding that sense of purpose, finding that self-empowerment, and realizing that I do have support systems, and also getting the things going on in the mind. What brings you peace of mind? I had a ladies group, and we just sat there, talked about what it means to be a woman in society, and letting it all hang out and not caring what other people think, and getting back to what's important in life. This was a gentleman that was very depressed with dementia in Mountain View, California, who painted his home from Louisiana. This is Shreveport. And he would only paint in black. And the paints, you could pop out the paints. So after weeks of him continually to paint in black, I popped the black paint out because I was curious what he would go to. Well, he went to brown. So he started painting all in brown. So I put the black back in, gave him back the full paints. And then after a while, he started to paint in purple. And purple in color theory tends to be a royal color, a high spirituality, high self-esteem color. People that are also going through transitions, you'll tend to see a lot of purple. And that's like a purple color theory. And then eventually, after about 6 months, he started going to full color. And in art therapy perspective, when you look at trees, when you see roots and these life in trees, it tends to represent support systems. So if you look at the left, there's no root systems. You look at the right, it's full of roots, it's full of life, it's full of support. What changed for him was that he was having more involvement in his activities. He was coming to the day center not once a week, but 3 times a week. And he looked forward to the art. He looked forward to talking about his farm in Shreveport, Louisiana. He looked forward to being able to tell his story. Integrating past to present. I work with seniors that, I used to do this, or, I used to do this for a living and I can't do this anymore. Or I used to be a dancer and I can't dance anymore. Well, paint it. So here was a mathematician from Stanford. He was also an astronomer, and he started with the blue, and then he got excited, and he kept saying, I can't use paint. Give me a pencil. I need a pen. So I gave him a pencil, and he started writing all these math problems, and he gave himself 100%. You got the one on the right. This was a woman that was an interior decorator and used the color for color swatches and talked about all the buildings and places that she got to redesign. This is a woman who worked in the forest and studied, she was a botanist and studied fungi. So she loved different types of mushrooms. This was a woman in the very late stages. This was the only thing that gave her attention. She could last 20 to 30 minutes versus 5 minutes. And all she said was, this was a quilt. And our daughter started sobbing because she was a quilt maker her entire life, hadn't spoken a word in over 3 months. And this is what she painted. So having whatever your past are, there are rich history and rich lives despite memory, despite cognitive deficits, and it's giving the opportunity to still have those outlets of creativity. Everything you can find, a puzzle, finding the piece of the puzzle in nature, working with pastels, digital. There's so much free digital apps right now that you can do a lot with the digital types. This was taking painter's tape and writing out the word love, and then taking a cotton ball and doing some, just looking at favorite colors, somebody in the very late stages. So just having these types of meanings into your life. Looking at research, this was a PET scan. We haven't, as of 2011, there's a new PET scan using florbitapure that can actually pick up amyloid proteins. And now there's ones looking at tau proteins that are associated with the disease. So we're able to better identify if someone's appropriate for a research study or not by looking at their amyloid or now tau PET scans. But you can see there's normal, there's mild cognitive impairment. 90% of people with MCI stay where they are. 10% convert to Alzheimer's disease. This is why research really is actively looking at MCI, because we know if they have these amyloid and tau proteins, it's called mild cognitive impairment prodromal, MCI prodromal. So we know that's going to develop into Alzheimer's disease. And then the bottom is the MRI, where you can see all the atrophy. And I think this is important to show because especially in science, we tend to kind of lose track that we're working on a disease, but we're not, tend to lose track that we're working on a person. So it's really looking at the person along with the disease. You may be familiar with William Ettermohlen. He was an American that lived in England. And he was one of the first, I believe, that actually did self-portraits when he got diagnosed in 1996. So here he was in 1967. 96, he looks angry. 97, he starts to look more bewildered. And then you have 98, 99, and then he could no longer paint or draw anymore by the year 2000. So there was a lot of interesting dialogue among physicians on identity and memory. And that's something I'm working on my dissertation right now because I'm curious to know if we are more than our memories. And this is why I'm so fascinated with creativity and neurology, or the neurosciences, because I think we are more than that. So when we were at Sacramento, I was with Dr. Bruce Miller from UCSF. He's the head of neurosciences. Years ago, we did William Ettermohlen's exhibit at the Capitol in Sacramento. And there was a lot of discussion about, well, they don't have any self, there's no sense of awareness. They're losing their sense of self. So this therefore shows they have no awareness around them. And the controversy and the debate was debunking that, saying he's still creating, even though it's more rudimentary because it kind of matches what's going on. Your cells are dying in your brain. So your brain is typically going back to those infantile stages as it's, it's developing, it's progressing. So it does go back to more rudimentary drawings. But the fact is he was still creating. So this whole discussion about identity and memory is starting to come into play, and whether or not we have consciousness. We know now that we have we have the ability to reprogram cells, neurogenesis. We know that it used to be thought that we were born with a certain amount of cells and we die. When they die, that's it. We don't get any more. Well, if that were the case, we would just have these empty minds with nothing in there. So we do have a natural process as we get older that neurons break down, but we have the ability to generate new neurons. And this is a scan kind of looking at the various types of neurogenesis that are happening in the brain. So they're able to, it's a fascinating, great time to be in the neurosciences. The advancements in technology, I think, is progressing faster than we are. It's just interesting. So, but we know that creativity as we age plays a crucial role. Dr. Miller, who I worked with, says even though our brains age, it doesn't diminish our ability to create. Even in dementia, it doesn't wipe out all aspects of creativity. Indeed, People who never drew before did so, providing important clues to maybe where are these memory pockets? Where are we housing the creative abilities in the brain? So these are things actively being looked at, and how creativity plays a role in our brain health. NYU did a study, and they're showing, you know, as I showed that picture of that brain early on, we're using the left and the right sides. You have these hemispheres that are cross-sectioning. Now, children have a greater novel perception than middle-aged adults, but they lack the context to turn them into creative insights, that processing as we age. So we're actually more developed. And I'm not sure if Wendy Miller is on here, but she is the widow of the late Gene Cohen. She's a dear friend of Berna and I. And her husband was instrumental. He really helped put art therapy on the map. He started the NIH and geriatric mental health. He also started the Center on Aging and Health and Humanities at George Washington University. And he tragically passed away probably 9 or 10 years ago from prostate cancer. But he did a real extensive study looking at creativity in general. He looked at people both with and without dementia, all 65 years and older, from Seattle to San Francisco, New York, across the board. So he did this longitudinal study, and he found that just by people over 65 who were engaged in types of creativity, their physical health improved, their morale, their activity level improved, their doctor visits lowered, medication use lowered, and depression lowered. His theory was that creativity improves mental health and physical health. He's done some very rich studies over his years. It's a travesty that he's gone, but he made a huge imprint on the importance of creativity in aging. I was part of a study at Stanford, and we did the same thing. We looked at the arts versus other types of like doing puzzles or going to current affairs. And we looked at 9 different facilities up and down the peninsula at Stanford. And we used the pain facial scale. At the time, it was called the Wong-Baker Parent Affect Rating Scale. And we were able to prove that there was more awareness, there was more alertness, we're having more socialization, more positive cohesion. People were smiling and laughing and engaging with one another. And you're using both those left and the right hemispheres. So we were actually able to show by that the art therapy group outweighed doing puzzles. It outweighed folding towels, and it outweighed being involved in current events. This was interesting. This National Taiwan University conducted a study looking at more than 60,000 older adults in Taiwan, and they found the same type of thing. Those who were involved in just the creative arts had lower rates of loneliness and depression, higher morale, improved hand dexterity, developed new social roles because of the programs that were being offered. There were improved mood and confidence. And this is what I found also interesting, is there were better family relationships. And in some cases, it even increased their family income. And how did it increase family income? They were selling their works of art. The art that they were making in their senior centers and their programs were having exhibits, and they were selling. So now it's like I'm a paid working artist in the world. I thought that was awesome. So we're looking at a looming question. What is happening in the brain during periods of heightened creativity? We're utilizing advanced approaches to really exploring the neurobiology of creativity and its importance in neural connection. We're building upon unity and empathy. When we block it up, when we're not feeling good and we just not doing anything to release that, it's going to make it more numb. At UCSF, there was a new they're using a new MRI scan, and they looked at 405 Chinese participants, and they measured their creativity scores, and they found it was significant compared to those who were not creative. So basically, in a nutshell, what this is showing is that scientists were able to just look at brain scans and be able to identify who was creative and who was not, just by looking at the brains and their scans, because they were stronger in certain areas, they were thicker in certain areas. It had way much more advancements than those who were non-creative. Nancy Andreessen, same thing. There's overwhelming evidence of how creativity is essential in our well-being, despite any cognitive or intellectual deficits. And this same thing, they did a long study in Seattle showing that in our aging years, we were able to have more flexibility or plasticity than other dwelling on their accomplishments of the past. So people now are, people those 65 years and older, were looking forward. I'm going to have new goals in life, and I'm having a new creative enterprise. And they maintained curiosity, and they were open to experience, and they were able to keep up with their times and adapt to the changing circumstances around them. And Leonardo da Vinci, painting was a science. He was, you know, the Renaissance man who said creativity is a productivity marked by imagination. You know, as artists and scientists, we must understand the world. You know, artist understands the world as a scientist understands the world as an artist. They need each other. Music is one of the things that activates the entire brain. This is also what's being actively looked at for people that are depressed and instead of in dementia, because what's happening in the world is we're over medicating people. We're trying to, you know, these facilities are over abusing, and they're actually killing their residents by over medicating them with psychotropic drugs to control behaviors. So they're making them more zombie-like instead of giving them quality of life. When we're listening to music that we enjoy, we release a dopamine. Now, as we get older, our dopamine, our serotonin levels lessen. We're not making as strong connections as we used to in our younger years. So as we get older, we tend to release less and less of these neurotransmitters, these chemicals. So it's important to keep boosting that. And music can be a way that can boost that pleasure reward system. Dr. Sheriff is a neuropsychiatrist from Johns Hopkins that I worked with at the research center in Fort Myers, who tragically passed away from ALS 2 years ago. But he really was an advocate in the importance of art and music and the brain health. This is combining the two. For those, you know, when we're listening to music, our personal music that we love, what's music that we enjoy, and painting to it. And especially for persons with dementia, we're tapping in to these pockets where these memories come back and they surface. This was a woman who hadn't painted in 6 months, who we put her personalized music on because she was completely agitated, and she would swing and hit at staff, but this would calm her down. Red was her favorite color, so she started painting her trees. This woman on the left was late stage, and I asked her what, she kept telling me, I'm not an artist, I can't paint, I'm not an artist, which you commonly hear. You know what, there's no wrong way to do art. Just have fun with the process. I asked her what her favorite song was, and she started humming Beautiful Dreamer. And when I asked what color she saw, this is what she painted. Her husband came in, and when he saw this, he just started sobbing. This was the song that they danced to the first night that they met. Mary Middleton in New York and Cynthia Epstein, a social worker, they were the first to really put the importance of museums and art on the map. So they call it Meet Me at the MoMA, and more museums across the country, across the world, are doing these types of programming. And Berna Hubner has her fantastic movie, I Remember Better When I Paint, that highlights the importance of museum gatherings for all of us. But specifically for seniors and dementia, they found there was an intellectual stimulation, there were shared experiences, there was social interaction. I'm in an accepted environment, there's no stigma, no shame. There was an emotional carryover, meaning I'm leaving this museum and I'm feeling good. And these feel-good feelings carry over well into the evening. I want to return and I want to come back. Brighter affect, brighter mood, improved self-esteem, improved confidence. This was a banker who was an accountant in New Jersey that never did art in his life, who says, if somebody would have told me I'd be an artist later in life, I would have thought they were nuts. He was introduced to Romare Bearden at the Newark Museum and just took off with his work, and it actually was able to exhibit some of his work in New Jersey. This was a still life on the right. Finding these new passions, finding new joys, especially when things set in and we're not able to do the things that we might have been able to do in our prior years. Finding those. I love this because it's husband and wife getting to be husband and wife, not taking on the role of a caregiver, having a shared experience as husband and wife. Cultural, celebrating grandbabies, all the memories that are coming back. These are all the different programs. This was programs we did in Naples. This is programs I'm doing at Yale at the University Art Gallery. We bring in musicians that come in and play the instruments. And I found it interesting that the picture on the far left, the group, I had a physician ask me which one had the diagnosis. And I thought that was a puzzling and interesting question to ask, because who cares? These are people enjoying a moment without any stigma, without any diagnosis, but being their own authentic selves. And I think it's important that society is giving us the opportunity as we age to have these outlets, that we have the right to those outlets. This is an example. This was in Orange County, California. This man who couldn't talk anymore shuffled over, and he chose yellow because yellow was his favorite color. And this is all he did. And he died that night. And when his children came, they showed them the work that his father did, and they just broke out in tears because their mother, her name was Ruth, his wife. This is how he used to sign her name. So there are things happening. I always say art is the organization to a disorganized mind. And art and science need each other. There's things happening, there's things where science can't explain, but art can. And that's that spiritual component, I think. You know, we're looking at this brain at autopsy. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It's the source of all true art and science. You know, how is it that this man was able to remember this at the time that, you know, he passed several hours later after this? There's things happening that I find that the neurosciences is really trying to tap more into. And I think it's an exciting time. And I love the Scottish poet, Kathleen Jamie. Art arrived because human beings had become capable of symbolic thought and of expressing concepts. 40,000 years ago, we developed the kind of brains we have now, meaning that art gave us the ability to imagine and express these concepts we had years ago. Art is a defining feature of the modern human mind, not some decorative extra. And these are currently all the open art spaces happening as more and more people are embracing an open door studio. Connecticut, New York, Germany, Australia, England, Italy, France, New Zealand. It's exciting to see the embracing of this, because we're starting to know now how imperative creativity is in life, especially as we age. This was a comfort zone. And this is getting out of that comfort zone. And this is what those scans were showing. People who are involved in creativity are going from their comfort to the growth zone. Even later in life, we're becoming more flexible in our approaches. We're taking the steps to get out there. I often hear, I'm not an artist, I can't do this. Who cares? Have fun, enjoy that moment. Especially right now, here we are in a pandemic and we're all in this isolation. And what better way now to spend some time finding some creativity at home, creating a memory book, creating a collage, using found objects in the backyard or the front yard or in the home, and creating, you know, things together, creating things with the family, but having those experiences together. These are the exciting things happening in neurology. I am really proud to say that the geriatric neurology medical textbook is, to my knowledge, is the first American medical textbook that has a chapter dedicated to expressive arts therapy. So we're now teaching our future neurologists and geriatrics the importance of, let's look at creativity and not let's just look at psychotropic drugs, because we still have a rich embodiment of humanness within us. Mark Abronin is a neuropsychiatrist. He's from Harvard and he's from Yale. He just recently wrote a book called The End of Old Age, who specifically talks about all the important things of creativity to live longer and having more purpose in life. Practical neurology, Daniel Potts he's a huge advocate in the field of dementia in his work, and he's instrumental in really advocating the importance of creativity. So this was his father's painting, who died of Alzheimer's disease, and he really advocates the importance of humanness in treating clients and aging with dignity and integrity. And practical neurology focuses now on the importance of that in their summer editions. Furnace, I remember Better When I Paint. You know, it's a film that PBS picked up. It's a beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to do that. I think we'll be discussing it May 7th. I'll be privileged to be with her and I believe Judy on a talk on her work with the museums. And then Alive Inside is the importance of music and memory. And that's what Thriving for Life is also now doing. I think Deb Ferris is on here, and she has this amazing nonprofit that's flourishing in the importance of art and music, as well as other types of modalities and care. So be careful of our inner critic. Put your inner critic aside. For every negative, I want you to counteract it with a positive, because for every left, there's a right. Having fun in the process, who cares what it looks like? Just enjoying life for what it is in that moment and finding what is sacred to you. And I'm going to end it with here. With hundreds of trillions of synapses, each containing upward of 1,000 molecular scale switches, a single human brain has more connections than all the computers, routers, and internet connections in existence. So what can we do in the vast and growing jumble of humanity to enhance our collective creativity and agility? Make like a neuron and be as connected as possible. While brain cells find each other in a sea of chemical soup, the best human connections are made through humor, wonder, grief and affection, tenderness and awe, gratitude and art. Now here's an assignment I'd like you to do. It's called the Life Alignment Wheel. So you're going to have a wheel, and you're going to divide it up into a pie, and you're going to section it off. So we have health, and your health is going to represent everything: your physical health, your emotional health, mental, physical, spiritual health. Now you're going to have your family and your friends. How are your relationships? Leisure and recreation. How much fun are you having in life? And your personal growth. That is what is your purpose? What is your meaning? What are your passions and what are your interests? How are you nurturing your personal growth? Now, outside of the wheel is a 10, and the inside, the very middle, is a 0. And you're going to rate where are you in each of these segments. You're going to rate, and you're going to draw an arc. You can see kind of my failed attempt to try to do this, but it's going to be like an arc where my health is pretty good. I'm going to give that probably an 8. My family and friends, my relationship's pretty good. I'm going to give that maybe a 7. My leisure, I'm not having a lot of fun. I'm going to give it a 3. My personal growth, I think I could be doing better. I'm going to give that a 4. So the idea is, when you look at your life alignment visually, if this were a bicycle wheel, would you be able to ride your bike? So where are areas where you feel it's not as strong, and what are ways that you can implement something new? From the little to the big things, taking those baby steps. What are those things in that moment that you can do? And having some goals for yourself so that you're getting from that comfort zone to that growth zone. Energy is the key to creativity. Energy is the key to life. So I hope with this that you continue to be creative, and if you're not, find those ways of just having fun in that process. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Angel. If you'd stop the share. And this is our way of thanking you and applauding you for a great presentation. And so now we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to, I'll read them off, or unless, like, Iris, do you want me to read it, or do you want to ask it yourself?
If you could read it, that'd be great.
Okay. So Iris asks, can art be seen as writing or baking after retiring?
Absolutely. Creativity, when you think of the word creative, it doesn't have to just be painting, sculpture, art. Creativity can be knitting, sewing, reading, baking, writing. Absolutely. Anything that's in that self-expression, gardening.
Oh, we've got a lot of gardeners I know too. So John says, thanks for a great presentation. Do some people respond better to sculpture and others to painting?
Yes, there's it depends on what your knack is. As like, you know, as an art major, you tend to kind of figure out what mediums work for you. What are you interested in? What do you like? and going to that. So yeah, so there's some that are good and across multiple sectors. I have friends that are across all platforms, but then there's some who this is just what I happen to do. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it any better than one. One is not better than the other. It's just personal preference.
So maybe some people more tactile.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Angel, you mentioned some free digital apps for creative activities. If you want to even give me those, or if you want to throw some in the chat.
Yeah, there's a ton. Okay, so some of the apps, this is what I use. I use multiple platforms across it. There's all kinds of photo filter apps you can use. One is called Snapseed.
Oh yes, Snapseed, yes.
Then there's Rookie Cam, ROOKIECAM, Rookie Cam. There's another one just called Photo Lab. It has a lot of really neat backdrops that you can kind of do some photo like playing around with. There's Photo Grid. If you go into the iTunes store and you type in photo filters or photo apps, there's so many out there that are also free. You can upgrade if you choose to, but there's some, these are the apps that I just named off are ones that I use, and I'll take a photograph for myself on my phone, and then I will use 2 to 3, even all of them, to create my own type of work of art using all of those different types of features.
Okay, I just entered that into the chat. Just so that you know, those of you who are not familiar, where you enter in, if you click on the chat button and you see where it says type message here, you should see to the right a little box, very faint, with 3 dots in it. If you open that up, the top line says save chat, and you can save the entire chat for yourself if there's information that you want. So the next question, we've got great questions here. We're going to honor the time that it is an hour, so anyone who needs to pop off. But Angel, if it's all right with you, can we keep going with the question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. My husband wasn't interested in crafts or games or art, but he loved to tell a story, some pretty amazing stories. So the art of storytelling too, I guess, is
absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot, and there's a lot of digital types of storytelling books that people are putting together as well. One is called The Voice Library.
The Voice Library?
That's one of them.
Okay, that's in there. Let's see. Oh, would you be willing to share your email address, Angel?
Yes, my email is A as in apple, C as in cat, Duncan, DUNCAN, and then it's ACD. So it's acduncanacd@gmail. And I'm happy to send, I have this condensed in a Word document so it's easier to read, and I'm happy to share that. And if anybody needs any other referrals or resources, I'm happy to give what I can.
Yeah, so you can, Angel's email is right there in the chat as well. Okay, so let me go back. At early stages of MCI, can creativity improve it?
That's an interesting question. I've had people that have never had art in their life, like the gentleman that had MCI that got introduced to Romare Bearden, or Daniel Potts' father. He was an Alabama sawmiller who never picked up a paintbrush ever until he got the disease, and you would think that he went to art school. It's amazing to see how some people really, they just tap into these creative outlets that are still unknown where or why. It's not across the board, but there are some people that actually flourish, that they have these kind of hidden talents that we wouldn't know about until they have the diagnosis.
And MCI is mild cognitive impairment, correct?
Yes.
Next one, a musician close friend of mine said he saw colors corresponding to the musical notes that he played. Could you comment on that?
That is a neurological phenomenon. I believe it's called neurosynthesis, if I have the right terminology. And that is a Oliver Sacks, the late Oliver Sacks, actually has a wonderful piece that he's written on talking about specific patients that see color to music. That actually is a neurology phenomenon.
Interesting. Why is my creative energy for painting, guitar, piano all so affected by the pandemic?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So her creative energy in painting, guitar, and piano must be one way pre-pandemic and another way post-pandemic, or in the pandemic. So why is it affected by that?
That's interesting. I can't say what's going on behind. There might be something, and without knowing or talking to the person, I wouldn't be able to fully answer that, and I don't know the answer to that.
Go ahead, Mary, comment on that.
I just noticed that, so I'm a nurse and I went to Yale too. But I find that now in the pandemic, now that I'm retired, I have to really motivate myself to do the painting, the guitar, and the piano. I have all these outlets, but if I don't set myself down to do it, it's really hard to sit there.
It is very hard, especially because it's like Groundhog Day. Every day right now is the same, and days are bleeding into one another. And it's like, where's the motivation? And that's what it is. It's motivation. And it is, unfortunately, a lot of people are experiencing that. I myself, I don't have access to my gym right now, and it's taking everything I have just to pull my mat out and do yoga, just because it's like, what's the point? But it is conditioning, and it's unfortunately having to be your own cheerleader and motivating, pushing yourself to do it, even though you may not want to. It's knowing that I feel better after I do it. Mm-hmm. And so if you know that you feel better afterwards, and it's good for you, then you just force yourself to do it.
I think there's a certain amount of fear that everybody has. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Our schedules are all disrupted, and so everything has changed. And so I think that people can't operate on the same level that they were like always.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
I was just going to make a comment about that question. I think similar to the drawings that Angel showed in terms of art therapy, what matters is that we create things that match who we are and how we feel. So to piggyback on what Berna said, we don't feel safe, we don't feel good, we're operating out of fear. And so somehow our creativity is operating in the same way. I would say ditto. I have a studio, and the upstairs is my art therapy studio, and the downstairs is my art therapy studio, and I have all the time in the world to spend in it right now. But I really can't be with myself in that kind of way. So I appreciate the motivation part, but I also think that we are matching where our psyche and souls are right now.
Yeah, and we're looking for guidance, and we're not always finding it, and that's why Governor Cuomo is so guiding us right now. He's offering us some solace and some information and some help, and we look forward to hearing what he has to say, or at least I am, and my friends are.
Yeah, it's just important. It's very important that you're not allowing this to consume you, though. You don't want to be living every day in fear, and you don't want to be living every day in despair. So it's important to be mindful of how you're feeling and reaching out to people. If it's at the point where I know telemedicine and teletherapy has really exploded right now because of exactly this.
Well, and it's also really important to do things like this. I just got off a call and I had a class on Manet. And you just try to expand your horizons and do the best that you can and help your loved ones and try to do your best. But I just wanted to tell you that we're so happy that Angel was able to give this fantastic presentation, and I'm so happy that Wendy Miller, whose late husband, Dr. Gene Cohen, could join us too, because Gene Cohen was, as Angel said, was the scholar that put all of this art history, art therapy together, and he's been a guiding light for me too. And thank you, Judy. Judy and I met a few years ago when you kindly screened our film in Colorado, and And here we are again, and it's wonderful for you to invite us.
I'm so happy to have you. I just wanted to tell you too, that, at 11:30 every day, we started these calls. We closed Senior Planet on March 13th, and we started these calls on March 16th. And so every day at 11:30, a large amount of the people that you see on this call have been here almost every single day. And we've done different things. We've done learning, we've done laughing, we've had some music and some videos. And one of the things that we did was the doodling. So the Zen tangles and the Zen doodles. And so here was mine. Just on scrap paper, right? But it's interesting how what you're saying is that with the motivation, I seem to have a lot of motivation to go to the refrigerator, though I don't know why. But no, but with the motivation to do other things, I think that that's really a great thing for us to forgive ourselves for not having, because as we go through this, and I commend all of you who have been so engaged in so many ways, who never knew didn't even know what Zoom was necessarily, and have participated in all different things that I've thrown at you all this time, and I've got a lot more to give you too. But the thing that really impresses me is that we've actually, Berna and Angel, we've become a community here, and we've really begun to get to know each other a little bit better. And we had one day where we did vent about the negative side of what we're going through, and that made some people uncomfortable, and some people were glad to have it. But what I think is important for all of us is that there's no right or wrong answer for this. This is not anything we have experience with, but I certainly thank goodness that I have you guys every day to know that it isn't just the four walls, it isn't just the same old, and it's something different. And I think that art and creativity, which is the creative expression, is one of the impact areas for Senior Planet. It's part of our mission, that where we incorporate that with technology. It's really great that Senior Planet has always recognized the value of creativity. So I think whether, we decide to clean out a closet and be creative in how we put it all back together, or we do something in painting, or we do, something with, that's more tactile, or something like listening to music, whatever it is, I think Mary Lou, she left the call, but, she brought to my attention how this was a break in the day. And I think if you equate that to your creative energy, that break in the day, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, and doing a little doodle is so important. So I think that's something that will help our brains. And Angel, you really brought to light that, these are important components to being healthy.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming on. And Angel, I have